Before we jump into the episode today, I want to share something with you from my heart. First of all, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really can't tell you how much your support means to me. We've been doing the podcast now for almost 4 years. I can't even believe it. And I'm so grateful for each and every single one of you that listens, shares an episode with your friends, sends me a DM or a text message letting me know how an episode resonated with you or any aha moments. Seriously, I couldn't be more grateful to be able to create this podcast. It has been such a blessing in my life, and I love hearing the ways it's been able to provide value in yours as well. One thing you might not know is how much work it takes to be consistent with a podcast. In fact, did you know that the majority of podcasts don't make it past episode number 10? And we are well beyond that. And it's just a lot thinking of the episodes, recording them, editing them, managing the guests, making sure that everything runs smoothly and gets uploaded consistently and regularly. And so that's why I have created an amazing opportunity for you to support the podcast monetarily. And in exchange for that, you will get exclusive premium subscriber content. So for as little as $3 a month, you can become a premium subscriber of the podcast. And every month I will upload new voice-guided workouts and breathwork meditation audio for you. So that way you can work out with me, coaching you in your ears. You can also take a moment to reduce your stress and relax and come down and ground down with one of my breathwork audios. So if that is on your heart to support the podcast for as little as $3 a month to become a premium podcast subscriber, I can't tell you how much that means to me and the growth of this podcast. I appreciate you. If you're interested, click the link in the description, become a premium podcast subscriber, new content every month, and while supplies last, I'll send you an exclusive podcast coffee mug so you can have your self-love and sweat coffee every morning. I appreciate you. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast, the place where you'll get inspired to live your life unapologetically, embrace your perfect imperfections, break down barriers, and do what sets your soul on fire. I'm your host, Lunden Souza. Hey friend, it's me, Lunden Souza, online lifestyle transformation coach. I help people all over the world just like you who know they are meant for more, get their mind right and their body tight, and go from crazy busy to crazy happy. And hey, if it's our first time meeting, welcome. So happy to have you. And if you've been with us for a while, it's so great that you're here too. I'm really excited to share this episode of the Self-Love and Sweat podcast with you. Hey, I want to tell you quickly about 2 ways that you can get connected beyond the podcast to uplevel your health, your life, your fitness, reach your goals, but also support the podcast as well. So the first option is our Self-Love and Sweat monthly members only meetup. We meet up on the last Saturday of the month on Zoom for 90 minutes to cover some important topics, to answer your questions, and then to also do a workout together. It's a great way to have that support, have that accountability, get supercharged, and get reminded that there are other people all over the world on this journey of self-love and sweat, and you don't have to do it alone. You can join your first month for only $1 using code SELFLOVE1 at checkout, and then it's $27 a month after that. So you go to lifelikeLondon.com/monthly, use the code SELFLOVE1 at checkout to try us out, test it out for only $1 for your first month, and then you can be on board to listen to the podcast, join up on the meetups, and just really feel like you're connected and thriving on this journey to reach your goals. The second option is our Strong at Home for Women 8-week dumbbell-only workout plan. We have women all over the world getting stronger from the inside out right at home, right? So we're ready to take action to get stronger despite the circumstances of the world. And we know that we're not about to do that alone. So embark on this 8-week journey with us. You can go to lifelikeLondon.com/strong at home. You can pick up your 8-week plan. And the exciting thing is that every 8 weeks, we open it up, myself and my co-coach, for VIP all access coaching with us. So not only do you get the plan, but you get Zoom fireside chats with us. You get an exclusive way to chat with us anytime so you can ask your questions, share your progress. And we're always continuing to stay connected and motivate and inspire each other on our journey to get stronger, no matter what that means for us. So if you know that you're meant for more, you're ready to get stronger from the inside out, and you're just like, yes, I need a plan and some structure, something to tell me what to do. I know I'm ready, but I need that coaching. I can't do it alone. We are here for you. You can go to lifelikeLondon.com/strong at home, pick up the plan, figure out when our next VIP all access registration is opening so you can get that support and guidance. And the third thing, I said there was two, but the third thing is you can do both. You can join us for those monthly meetups. You can be there for the 8-week program. You know, this coaching and this support is here for you. We want to get you real results that last so you never have to start over again. And so you guys are awesome. Enjoy this episode. Get connected. Self-love and sweat, friends. Today's guest on Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast, is Morgan Beard. Morgan Beard has dedicated her life to using creativity to heal and empower. Managing depression and anxiety since age 13 made personal development a non-negotiable. She received her BA in Visual and Media Studies from Duke University in 2012 and her MPS in Art Therapy from the School of Visual Arts in New York City in 2017. As an art therapist in New York, she worked in a public elementary school, an adult inpatient psychiatric unit, and a 183-bed nursing home. Her life came to a screeching halt after burning out and entering another major depressive episode. Focused for the first time on her own happiness, Morgan moved across the country and started over in Los Angeles. She began building her life coaching business, working with individuals to create holistically fulfilling lives and families to increase communication and harmony. This gave her the confidence to embrace her earliest passion for singing and making music to help people move. Welcome to the podcast, Morgan. So great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. I mean, what a robust and amazing bio full of, it's like just kind of like just a taste of it, but there's so much, meat and potatoes in that story and so much density there. So why don't you kind of give us up to date? You're in Los Angeles now, and, you know, throughout your life, you really have had, I mean, it says at the age of 13 is where you really started experiencing, depression and anxiety and things like that. So knowing what you know now and where you're at now, how has that journey helped you? And how are you feeling where you're at now in the middle of this kind of change and transition?
Yeah, I am right smack in the middle of it. I just released today the third song off of the first EP, and oh my God. I mean, I honestly never thought when I was 13 and struggling, or really any time up until the last few years when I started working on this music, that I would ever heal enough or figure it out enough to get to this point where I took this gigantic chance on myself, because the idea of making music was so scary and painful to me. And I'm really proud to be able to be sitting here today and be like, whoa, it's happening. I'm doing it. And yeah, I feel so much more strong and so much more grounded and so much more empowered in my life than ever before. Even with, of course, the continued challenges. It's not like I'm like sitting on my cloud looking down like, ha ha ha, I've surmounted it all. But I have overcome so much and recognize the sort of symptoms of that in just what I've been able to do and how much I've been able to put myself out there. I mean, it's still tremendously vulnerable for me to be showing up as a musician and trying to make that path happen alongside of the coaching. So I have coaching moments with myself 24/7.
Right. I know it's so interesting as a coach as well. It's like there's that duality of like coaching yourself and then hearing and feeling the client in you and being like, oh, with the tools that I have, and I'm sure the tools that you give your clients too, it's like it's already in you somehow. It's just a matter of having the tools to kind of break through and be vulnerable and share that. And I love what you said about it was, I don't know if that's exactly what you said. I don't remember exactly, but you said you were like almost scared or afraid to put that music out there, to put your craft, it's a huge, vulnerable step. And I know that a lot of people listening, it's like, we can be really scared to start small or be scared to share, what's really at our core. And so how did you break through some of that fear, or how are you continuing to break through maybe some of that fear to put that out there and to put your voice and your music and your story out there?
Yeah. I mean, just going off of what you said about how it's hard to start and be at the beginning. It's like, I've been life coaching for 4 years now and feel a bit of like, I've got a bit of a handle on what that is and have built that up and feel really confident in that. But I'm now having to represent this other side of myself, and it's extremely nascent. Like, no one's listening to my music right now. And it's fucking scary. Because I am so at the beginning, and it's like, all right, I'm putting this thing out there in the world that represents so much of my blood, sweat, and tears, and such an intimate piece of my personal story that I'm very much experiencing live along with the music. And I don't know where it's going to go. There's no guarantees. And, we live in this world where people want to see you once you're super accomplished and on top of the world, but don't really want to see when you're like struggling at the beginning and nobody knows who you are. And, 5 people are following you and whatever, you know what I mean? Getting started is tremendously hard. And that's why a lot of people sit on that edge for a long time. So for me, I'm lucky in a way because I was in this sort of double bind where once I started to realize, oh, music is surfacing for me again. When I was 29, and had been now in Los Angeles for about a year, I'm surrounded by creatives and I have some friends who are making music. And so it was just kind of knocking at the door and it has been for a long time. Like, it never fully went away, even when I was just closeted and couldn't sing in front of anyone and just sang in my car and in the shower. But because my job is a life coach and specifically with people's artistic passions, which is sort of my niche, I'm encouraging people to go to those deepest places, pull out like, what do you really want to do? And then go for it in a way that's, fearless. I can't not do it. I can't see that that's happening for me as well at the same time and just be like, well, never mind. Don't actually do any of the things I'm telling you because I can't. So, it was a bit of a chain reaction of like, okay, I'm identifying it. I'm seeing it. My intuition is bubbling up, along with the fear. But then, you meet certain people, you have certain experiences and it draws it out of you, that desire in different ways and makes it seem more and less, realistic to follow it. And so it's really been a matter of every single day, you kind of take one step at a time. I have crises of faith around this stuff all the time, constantly. I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to quit because I've had extreme relationship challenges, losses, within the project and hurdles and just, but it's like, I look backwards on, well, I've come this far. So I have to keep kind of honoring myself enough to put the one foot in front of the other. And if one day all I can do is take one step or just rest on it and not quit, then it's a good day.
Yes, I love that. And I love what you said is I can't not do it. It's despite being scared, or maybe some imposter syndrome or anything that might pop up. Or like you said, sometimes just like sitting in it and just being like, today I'm not going to do shit except for I'm not going to quit. And sometimes people have asked me that before, like, how do you, stay so consistent or do that? And I'm like, I can't not do it. The pain of not doing it would be so much more painful than the pain or nervousness or whatever, fear, angst, whatever might come up of being vulnerable and put that out there. Does that resonate with you?
Oh, 100%. And like, if you're listening to this and you have something in your life that's kind of like knocking at the door, that it just keeps knocking. So you're going to have to answer it at one point or another. And you might as well not be wrestling with the existential nervousness of like, should I do this? Should I not? Like being in that place for me is so intolerable that it's like, all right, well, this is just going to keep happening. This is going to keep showing up in my life. I'm going to keep being faced with the same question. Should I, shouldn't I, blah, 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 blah. So let me just do it. And then we'll deal with the next problem.
Yeah. And sometimes that next best step is just like taking action, taking messy action, just going after it. And I find too that sometimes if I feel stuck or stagnant and then I have that voice, it's like, you can't not do it. It's like, well, I don't know what to do now. Okay, I'm just going to do something. And at least it's going to push me in that direction for sure.
Yes. And the messiness is so real. Like I've been preparing to release this music video and song today for, a long time, months, whatever. And I just noticed that there was like some mistake in the video itself. Like there were some frames that are like just not where they're supposed to be. And you can see like a black line. And I'm just like, well, that's going out tomorrow. It's messy, but you know what? It's there. This represents how stressed I've been, how hard I've worked, how much I've had going on. And it's not perfect. Oh, well.
Yep. And I think that perfectionist mindset or that ideal that things need to be perfect, which sometimes I think is a block too, is like, it has to be perfect or I can't put that out there. But it's like every time you do it again, it's going to get better. It's going to be, maybe now that the black line was there this time, the black line won't be there next time. It's like once you notice certain things, they just become, more noticeable the next time. And yeah, I loved listening to your music. I've loved kind of cyber stalking you a little bit of just going onto your Instagram account and just seeing a lot of your posts and a lot of your beautiful images of you just, looking, today's our first day really meeting and conversating, but just, I get that feeling of just kind of nurture and connection and, and just that kind of, it's almost like a lot of your images I was looking at, it's just like a little like hug or like it's warmth or like you're being held almost. There's one where you're kind of in a tree and it's just so beautiful and so great to watch. And I was listening to one of your songs and I think it was called Water. I think it's called Water. Yeah. And one of the lyrics, the lines really spoke to me and I jotted it down in my notes. And I think a lot of people know what this feels like. And it's almost like, you're life coaching through your music, but it says, the finish line feels like it's so far away. Everything seems so much harder today. And I just love that. That really spoke to me. And I think a lot of people, even there's moments where we might be motivated, the finish line, we can see it. It's great. We got it. And then there's days where it's like, shit, that looked really close yesterday. And now like it's looking really far and I'm tired and, something's going on in my personal life. Like you mentioned, relationship stuff, other things are going on in our life as we're doing our work and things like that. So, I love that line. And I think we all have kind of been there. Where did that come from? Did that come from a specific moment or just kind of a feeling? I just love that. It really spoke to me.
Thank you so much for pulling that out. I really appreciate it. Water, I wrote so much just downloading the experience of having depression. It's like sometimes everything feels like moving a mountain. And I think back to when I was in college and I was first officially diagnosed with depression. Mm-hmm. And it was like my senior year and I was starting to hit that feeling of like, oh my God, what am I going to do after this? Like the whole path up until now has been prescribed for me. And now I have to make my own choice. And is it going to be good enough? And just that whole, like, what's next question was so overwhelming. And so I started to really dip back into depression and went to my school counselor and got prescribed medication for the first time. And that was a really confronting experience because I had to work through a lot of the stuff about, like, am I a failure now that I'm like acknowledging this and taking something to supplement how I show up naturally? Does that mean I'm broken? Does that mean I'm a failure? And I remember, like, months leading up to this, every day was like, oh my God, I've got to get up, and I can't even imagine myself like doing the dishes, these really sort of basic tasks that just felt like moving a mountain. And then I started taking the medication, and it was like a week later, I was just like doing the dishes and then going, oh my God, like this feels fine. Like it felt like nothing. And so I really wanted to capture in water, like that really low state we're in emotionally sometimes, where everything just feels so impossible. And whether it is or not, that feels real to us. And I think sometimes it's like us trying to carry our huge burden without even expressing or acknowledging how hard it is for us. And then that is adding to the burden. It's adding to the shame of like, why can't I do this? Like, what is wrong with me? Instead of recognizing I'm having these really heavy, really intense emotions and I'm overwhelmed because of X, Y, and Z. Let me just sit with that for a minute, release some of the weight of that. And then it does feel easier to move on. And that's kind of the whole premise of water, is like, if you allow your emotions to flow, your burden is lighter.
Yeah. Such a great song. Such a great song. I loved everything that you said. But when you said that, I was like, oh, I need to write that down, because that, even just to read it for me on my own is, enough of a gift, but to be able to ask you about it here too. And I'm sure that you have clients that you're working with that experience that too. And so for yourself and for them, oftentimes I say, it's like, what's that domino that's going to knock down the other dominoes? So for people listening who like can't even freaking do the dishes, or waking up and it's like, just to take that 1 foot out of bed feels like you're moving a mountain, like you mentioned. What do you recommend, or what works for you or your clients as kind of that next best action or that next thing just to help you keep on keeping on?
Yeah. So I think a lot of times, especially when we're in that state, we look at like someone else's mountain and we're like, well, if I can't even do the dishes, how am I supposed to do, whatever that expectation, or we see someone on Instagram doing, or, it's like, then we feel even worse about ourselves. So the first step for everyone, pretty much in every situation, is go back to yourself, get into your own body, feel out like, what is it that I want in this moment right now? And I don't mean like, okay, doing the dishes feels impossible for me right now, but what I want is to go rewrite my resume and apply for 55 new jobs. It's like, no. That's not a realistic, that's not coming from a real place of like embodied wanting. That's like a should script of like, well, I'm already feeling terrible. Let me pile on this impossible task. It's like, no, maybe what you actually want right now in your physical body, and it may be kind of the voice of like an inner child or something very small and very vulnerable, is like, I need rest. I need care. I need a hug, and being willing to identify that most basic like, again, physical, intuitive want, rather than coming from the head going down, like coming from the body going up, of what do I really need right now at the most basic level, and having the willingness to look at that and give it to yourself and not talk yourself out of, well, that's silly, or I feel ashamed, whatever it is. It's like, no, you need a hug. Yeah, that's one of the most basic human needs. Hug yourself, call a friend, reach out for connection. And for me, like, all my experiences of depression have been extremely isolating. And that's a huge way that it burrows into you and keeps you there, is keeping you isolated. So I often find that some form of connection or another, while it's the hardest thing in that moment, it's often the most necessary. And it kind of just gets you a little bit out of that really damning, self-condemning perspective that you find yourself kind of stuck in.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, that connection is so important, and just reaching out. And sometimes that could feel like the mountain, just like calling that friend or reaching out to that person and being like, hey, I'm having an overwhelming day, or this is going on and I need a hug. It's not like I need you to go and take care of this to-do list for me and make sure that this gets done. It's just like you said, I love that visual too, of not the head down, but the body up. And sometimes we question that. It's like, oh, I need a hug. No, that can't be it. That's not going to, this is problem's too big for that to just be it, you know? And so I really love that visual of letting our body kind of come up and speak and tell us, you know, this is what we want, and being in a quiet quiet enough space to listen and tune in. And, I really love that visual. So thank you. So how do you work with your clients and even yourself, get to the root of any emotion, whether that's sadness, fear, guilt, anger, and learn to work with it so that you're the one steering the ship?
Yeah. So I do a lot of sort of expressive modalities and ways of interacting with my clients. I came from, like you said in my bio, I came from an art therapy background. So, and as I've always identified as an artist. So to me, self-expression was always a very natural vehicle for kind of looking at something inside of me, pulling it out, and then being able to reflect on it. And so now as a life coach, I have a lot of clients who have creative impulses like that. And so I love to lean into whatever a client is bringing me, whether it's like they love poetry, they love painting, whatever. I've also been using more and more with clients dance and movement. I use breath. I do a lot of guided meditation and visualization. And really all of those things are about, accessing the body, and letting stuff arrive and originate from the body. Because we live so much of our lives in our heads, and our heads create problems that we might not have even had. So it's like, how can we tap into the body wisdom and kind of, get relaxed enough, like feel safe enough in our bodies so that our minds can relax enough that answers arrive. And a lot of that is patience. Like I said, I do a lot of guided meditations and visualizations with my clients. So I'm leading them in a kind of internal exploration of what sensations are coming up for me and what might that mean? What are these body parts telling us versus what do you think is going on? And it's very, once you start to do this work, once I started to do this work with myself, that conversation between myself and my body flows a lot more easily. But at first, just like you said, there's a lot of questioning and a lot of like, is this really right? Is this really what I'm thinking? Should I really do this? Like, does this matter? All those questions that I think, for me at least, are like boil down to this root issue of feeling unworthy, that on its own needs to be kind of looked at and seen for what it is, and seen for the ways that it bleeds into how we think about what our body's telling us, how we think about the feedback we receive from other people and all that stuff, and really be able to identify the thread of like, oh, this experience in my life, I felt really alone and rejected. This experience in my life, I felt really alone and rejected. Oh, I'm doing something inside of me that's casting that shadow and making me feel like that's true. Maybe that's not even true. And I can listen to something underneath that might feel new, unfamiliar, confusing, might even feel wrong at first, but it's like fixing those misfirings of different mixed messages that we got as kids or, peers when we were little. Just kind of starting to unearth and rewire these automatic programs that we developed to protect ourselves, mostly when we were younger. And then as adults, it's like, well, we get to choose, but we have to also look at those things from a very compassionate, very kind and gentle kind of healing lens first, before we can feel safe enough to do the things that are harder and big stretches for us.
Mm-hmm. And I find too that when we do those things that are harder and those big stretches, a lot of stuff comes up, and a lot of the emotions I mentioned, like sadness, fear, guilt, anger. And like from my story is like, for the longest time, it was like, no, you be positive through all of it. You just kind of smile and you push through it and you see the bright side and the rainbow is coming and all of that. And I do see value in that sometimes, but not at the expense of, masking some of those other feelings. And, I always say like putting them in the Tupperware container and putting it in the back of the fridge, like eventually that starts to stink and eventually you can't not confront that. And so learning to have that grace with a lot of the emotions and stuff that are coming up. And I imagine so too, in a creative space with that creative energy, it's like a lot of this, it's like, well, what do I do with it? So how do you help your clients and how have you helped yourself see a lot of those emotions that sometimes, maybe people listening, it's like, oh, those are bad. We shouldn't, experience that. It needs to be the bright side and all of that. How do we really embrace those and then use them as tools and as teachers?
Yeah, I cannot tell you how much I hate that, like, everything has to be good and positive. It's so detrimental, and it has been in my life. I mean, I'm definitely a believer in, trying to focus on the things that you're grateful for and all that stuff. It puts your mind in a totally different state from like a fear state. But for me growing up, I was experiencing a lot of like emotional abuse and neglect and feeling a lot of really heavy emotions, feeling really alone in it. I was an only child as well. So sort of me and my parents, and they were telling me, this and that. And I was being punished and sent to my room alone for having sadness and, being kind of, anytime I would start to cry, like, no, so I got this message of like, oh, what I'm feeling is not acceptable at all. So what do I do with this? And I was also chastised for not expressing gratitude. Like, you be grateful, you have everything, it's all great, da 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 da. But inside I was like, this is awful. This feels like torture, because these most basic emotional connections were missing for me. So I felt really stuck between what was expected of me in terms of how I was supposed to relate to my experience, and then even doubting what my experience was, because no one was telling me it's okay that you're sad. It makes sense. So starting to unravel that, I think, is really important. And like you said about the Tupperware, I love that image. It's like, well, this doesn't quite work, because you don't really have to like take it out and like let it breathe. But with your negative emotions, they want to be released. They want to be transformed. So, you open that Tupperware lid and you let that stink come out, so to speak, and you witness it and you smell it and you're like, wow, yeah, that was really bad. And you let yourself have the feeling and the accompanying emotions, especially sadness. It's this amazing tool for being able to release and let it go. Like in the song Water, it's saying that like joy is on the other side of crying, specifically. Like crying releases hormones that allow us to feel good after we do it. And it's this really powerful symbol of like, when we give ourselves the ability, the time, the respect to honor those emotions, they come through us. And then on the other side, we feel good. And so there's so many different ways to achieve release. You don't have to necessarily cry. You can dance, you can breathe. Every time you're breathing in and breathing out, that's an exchange that's happening. If you draw, for example, you're moving your body and you're taking something that was inside and you're expressing it. And so anything that's expressed has a channel to come out of you. And I can feel now when something is stuck in me and I'm not giving it the time to express. And you start to develop this really like increased sensitivity with yourself and your emotions, where you recognize, oh, I'm feeling this little, buildup of sadness, and you're not at like an 8 out of 10, which you might be if you're holding on to things all the time. But now I can notice when I'm at a 2 and I'm like, okay, it's time to do a little bit of something, maybe even preemptively, just to stir that stuff up and allow it to come out of me. And I always self-discover so much when I give myself that opportunity. Also, I totally lost the thread of your actual question. I just went off on my own thing, but
I love it. I told you that from the beginning. No, it's like I said that from the beginning. I'm like, this is just very conversational flow. If we get, we want to go make a quick left there, we totally can. And, it's just, it's so, and you don't get there without continuing to show up and continuing to do the work to be able to, like you said, hear when you're at a 2, when your body's like, hey, what's up? Tune in, versus those moments where I think we can all, relate, where you're, something's banging on the door. And it's like, if you don't take action now, or, acknowledge this, or, work on this, whatever, it's a good feeling to have that. And it does take work, and it does take time. And it's like getting to know yourself all over again on a regular basis to really be able to hear that, like, oh yeah, that's that feeling I get. And for me, sometimes it's like a kinesthetic feeling, or like a little, feeling I'll get kind of in the back of my neck that I've learned to recognize, where it's like, oh, that's my body's way of giving me a little tap and a whisper, versus other experiences I've had where my body is just like, and nope, you're down, and so and that's what I love about this. It's not easy work, but it's just, getting to know yourself and getting to know what's going to work for you, and learning, like you said, how to kind of stir your own pot, or like clear things a little bit preemptively, being proactive, knowing what you can, offer yourself in those moments when you are feeling a little stuck. And, and so, how do we overcome some of the internal obstacles that keep us stuck? We can be in that same loop, and we find ourselves. And for some people, there's like no awareness there. It's just like they're in that loop, But then you get to that point where you're like, oh, like you said, you're like, oh, there's like the same scenario situation. I see that same loop completing itself more and more. But then sometimes we still feel stuck, and we're not sure what that next best step might be, or how to, or what to do with that, or what to make of that. So how do we kind of overcome that?
Yeah. So, there are, I'm sure, loops that I'm stuck in right now that I haven't even, like, my awareness hasn't even penetrated yet, because I'm on whatever level I'm on. I'm fighting the loops that I recognized in the past. So I think the good news is so much of this, like, healing process, bringing things up, looking at them, letting them go, and then the next thing surfacing, it's cyclical and it's continuous. So you can always look to, well, how have I handled something similar in the past? Oh, I got through this and that by doing this and that, and kind of rediscovering that, that innate power that you already have, because you already experienced it in some form or another in a situation in your past. Like, I like to do a lot of, holding up the mirror for my clients and like, look, like, you already got through something that was really tough. What skills did you use? And how did you see yourself in that moment? What did you feel in your body that allowed you to kind of harness and tap into that internal power? Because a lot of times too, when you're seeing the next loop that looks really overwhelming and like, oh my God, I can't possibly break that loop, you kind of tend to write out of your history all the things that you did in the past that were so awesome. We have that negativity bias where it's like, all I want to see is what sucks about my life right now, and what is insurmountable about it, versus like, well, having this more measured, more sort of positive oriented approach of like, well, I've gotten through something similar. I'm hella strong because of it. And maybe this is a challenge that's in a new skin, but I've seen these bones before. And I think a really good way to kind of orient yourself toward a new challenge is writing. I mean, that's a great place to start no matter what, because like any form of self-expression, it gets it out of you and onto something physical that you can then look at and reread and observe. Like it puts you in that vantage point of I am not it. Like this notebook and the things written on it are not physically me. So let me look at it as this objective document of what was I going through or what am I wrestling with? And then it gives you just that little bit more reflective distance to see yourself as separate from it and give you a little bit more power over it and feeling of agency. Like, oh, I can affect change with this thing. Maybe I can try this, or maybe I can try that. And then you also then, if you're brave enough, can wrestle with it with someone else and get even another vantage point on it beyond just, 5 minutes ago, the me from 5 minutes ago and the me from right now are working through this. If I have a coach, if I have a therapist, if I have a friend, now all of our brains are on this. And maybe there's some blind spot I'm not seeing, because a lot of times that's what's kind of keeping some cycle going, is like, oh, I've been looking at it from this one vantage point based on a script that I had about myself. And let me run this by someone who doesn't believe this to be true about me, who doesn't think I'm a pathetic loser, and see what they have to say.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I love that you mentioned writing, because that is something, because you also mentioned too, like, we get stuck in these loops and we forget in our history, like, oh, I've done it before, I can do it again. And, it might not have been that exact same scenario, but that was a tough situation, just as this is tough. It's igniting feelings of this, just like that did too. I showed up for that. I made that happen. And now I can do this again too. And writing, like I love to write all the time, even if it's just bullet points or phrases or just things that come up, but especially through challenging moments like breakups or when I moved abroad for a while and then moved back. It's like there was a lot of things, and I remember going back. So I remember journaling through one breakup and then going back to that journal during another breakup and being like, oh, I don't remember. And I remember writing in there, or I read it. It was like, yeah, I cried every single day. I'm like, I don't remember crying every single day, but I mean, maybe I was being dramatic at the time of writing it too. Right. But it's so nice to go back and be like, oh, yeah, like there's a lot of feels there that I worked through or that helped me. And I can go back and be like, whoa, thank you. Like, I'm so glad I went through all of that, because that helped me. Now it's going to help, and so writing and documenting that in any way. Sometimes I'd even do audio notes like on my phone and just kind of like talk it out of how I was feeling, almost as if I was like calling a friend, and going back and listening to those and being like, we can barely remember what we ate 2 days ago for lunch, let alone how we were feeling in that moment, in that hard time. And so writing it down and then being able to reread it and go back, not necessarily 5 minutes from now, but even, 5 months from now or years from now, to kind of look back and be like, whoa, that was, what I was telling myself, or those, that a lot of those thoughts and words and stuff that were popping up, that now it either makes me more empowered to, go in this next direction, or just kind of reminds me, hey, you were able to rewire a lot what you thought about yourself then, or what you thought about that situation. So even though you feel like you're looking at a mountain, remember, like you've already, if you kind of look back, there's a bunch of mountains that you've already climbed up. And so here you are at this next one. And one of the things I think so powerful about writing, and even whether it's physically writing or like being able to like rewrite our story and rewrite our scripts of not being good enough, or not being maybe creative enough, or loving enough, or not deserving enough, or whatever. So how do we really overcome that to really rewrite the story? Maybe when we're not even feeling it yet, it's like we're writing a story of how we want to be, but there's somehow a little that gap there that we just gotta, kind of get through. How have you been able to rewrite your story, and how do you help your clients do that too?
Yeah. Quickly to respond and hopefully not lose the thread of the current question, but I do that too, where I record voice notes. I will go on walks and I'll talk to myself for like 20 minutes working through something. And, to the outsider, it looks probably like I'm on the phone, but I'm just talking to myself. And like, you get over the little bit of shame of that, of like, this is weird, but you can, if what you need to do is talk through something, talk through it. Like, That's what you got to do. And then it's such a trip, just like you said, of like going back to the things that you used to write. And you're like, what have I forgotten about? What's similar that I'm seeing again? Where have I shifted? How am I handling this differently? And getting to make those little comparisons and find out how you've grown and maybe what growth still is there to be had. It's really like fun and humbling and sometimes disappointing, but it's such a good way to kind of track yourself over time, because we do totally lose track, and the our memory even is so subjective. But yeah, I like what you're saying about kind of, you have this data point of where am I now? And then you have this idea of where you want to be. And then there's a gap. And sometimes the energy of the gap has this feeling of like, oh my God, I'm never going to get there, such to the point where you might not even be able to imagine the like amazing version of yourself you want to be, or you can't even state something in the positive, like I am worthy, because right now you're feeling so unworthy. And then even kind of walking up to that chasm between where you are and where you want to be can feel like, oh my God, like again, that burden can feel even heavier as a result. But sometimes you can make a statement like, I'm willing to believe I'm worthy, or I'm willing to explore the possibility that I'm worthy, instead of going right to I am worthy. See if you can find a statement that has a sort of uplifting feeling to it. Like it's not clamping you down, like I'm not unworthy, or, like still having kind of the tinge of that negative language, but something that you can try on, like a pair of shoes that's just a little bigger than your current feet, versus like, I remember when I was little, I was like 2, and my dad would make me like put on his shoes and like walk around, and I would immediately fall on my face because, his shoes are this big and my feet are this big. And those shoes were just way too big. So I was going to fall on my face. But if I had, tried on theoretically, shoes that were just a little bigger, to the extent where it's like, I can see a version of myself growing into that gap kind of being a realistic gap, versus like, oh my God, I'm like across this canyon that I can't even see myself surmounting. It allows you to kind of settle into the possibility of occupying that new frequency. And then the more that you can confidently be willing to stretch into those new statements and affirmations. Like I was just doing this the other night of like, I was writing kind of, where am I? And then I was writing, where would I like to be? How would I like to feel about this thing or this person? How would I like to show up in this relationship? And using like not settling for the words that felt really like unrealistic and disconnected from where I am, but something, a future that I can try on, that I can really feel out and try on. And then repeating those things to myself so that I'm flowing in that energy. And it gives you a more tangible sort of pathway to becoming that person.
Yeah. And it's more, at least in my visual internal representation, it's like almost as, I'm open to working on, becoming more worthy. It's like, those are like the little bricks versus, pole vaulting across the gap. And I mean, sometimes we do that, and that's just kind of the visual I had, is like that pole and flying across, sometimes that happens and we just go, I am worthy. Like, that's just what, but, I love also the visual of just having like brick by brick to get across that gap. And honestly, Morgan, you are such a gift. Like, I'm so thankful for this conversation, because even you saying, about the shoes, and I can just imagine that I have a niece, and sometimes she'll slide on my shoes too. Same thing. It's like big boat shoes, and it's like you flip and fall over and whatever. And it's, just if something's a little bit bigger, you can see that there's just a little room for growth, and you can envision that a little bit more. And I just feel like, I got so much out of our conversation, especially that part, to tell myself, hey, Lunden, like,
put on smaller shoes. Like stop jumping into like the clown shoes right now, because you're going to be walking around all over the place. And yeah, you'll work on your stability a little bit, and that'll probably give you a little bit more cues on balance and whatever. But yeah, such a gift. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today. I just feel, I'm so thankful that we got to have you on the podcast, and that also I've been able to, listen to your music and just kind of get to know you in that space and hear even more. So it's so great. Where can everyone, find you and connect with you, whether it's for coaching or to hear your music? I know that we'll definitely want to do that. So how can we?
Yeah. So my coaching website is morganbeard.coach. Pretty simple. And for my music, my artist name is Munnie, Muunnie. That was actually my nickname when I was that toddler age trying on my dad's giant big shoes. And my website for that is iammunnie.com. And all my socials are at iammunnie, IAMMUUNIE.
Perfect. And we'll have all of those links linked in the show notes, and wherever you're listening to this, you'll easily be able to connect with Morgan. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to, following you some more and staying connected with you. And just thank you for everything that you're doing to bring purpose from your pain. It's really, really beautiful.
Thank you so much, Lunden.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast. Hey, do me a favor. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, give us a review. This really helps a lot. And share this with a friend. I'm only one person, and with your help, we can really spread the message of self-love and sweat and change more lives all around the world. I'm Lunden Souza, reminding you that you deserve a life full of passion, presence, and purpose, fueled by self-love and sweat. This podcast is a Hit Spot Austria production.